I'll speak first, and then Nayaswami Devi ji will speak after me. We're going to talk this evening about the art of supportive leadership. What we could really retitle it is the art of support as applied to leadership, because the principles of supporting people are the same whether you are supporting people in a family situation, whether you're supporting people as friends, or whether you're supporting people in terms of a project or a business that you have. But the key is on supporting people, and that key is extremely important, and the greatest success will come by your supportive endeavors for individuals. We're really basing this evening's talk on this beautiful book by Swamiji, which is called The Art of Supportive Leadership. And it's not long, but it's filled with extremely important principles for this subject. So let me touch on a few of those. But first of all, let's give a little bit of background. When I first met Swamiji, it was in 1966. And I became his assistant in San Francisco. And then when we came to the Ananda community in April of 1969, I became the general manager at that point and served in that role for the next 10 years. And then after that, Devi and I began to establish some of Ananda's first ashrams around the world. First, we established one in San Francisco. Then we helped establish one in Italy. And eventually, we helped establish the work in India. And during that whole time, we have served pretty much as the directors of Ananda Village, which is our central community for the whole of the Ananda movement. So many of these principles that we're talking about, not only did we learn from Swamiji, not only theoretically, but we learned them in such a way that we have practiced them during our whole life. And so we've seen the results of how you are able to succeed in practicing these principles. We've also seen the results of how you are able to fail when you don't practice these principles. Because over the course of nearly 50 years, we've had many, many Ananda leaders, and not all of them have been successful. Some of them, either the project that they were involved with failed, or in some cases, a very few, but in some cases, we actually had to remove them from the position of leadership because they just didn't understand the basic principles. So let me talk about a few of those basic principles. So this is really, as I said at the beginning, a discussion less about leadership and more about the principles of supporting people. The first thing about supporting people is that it has to be more about them than it is about you. Meaning that if you have a family and you're trying to, say, raise your children, you have to focus on the needs of the children. Perhaps it's their physical needs when they're very young, and then gradually it becomes their scholastic needs, their social needs, their support, but you have to support them, and your concentration has to be on them, not on you, not on, well, what are they giving me? Why aren't they behaving? Because that isn't pleasing to me. The more you think about yourself, the less you think about other people, and thinking about and supporting other people is what is going to help them grow. It's almost as if people are like a plant, and we can't, by our will, make a plant grow. The plant has its own life force. It has its own destiny, you might say. What we can do is make sure that that plant has the right environment for its most effective growth. So if the plant loves sun, we can make sure that it's in the sun. We can make sure that it has the nutrients that it needs. We can be sure that it has the right amount of water, not too little, not too much. And if we can support the plant in this way, its own God-given life force will help it to grow to the maximum ability that that plant is able to achieve. And it's the same with people, exactly the same. We can't force them to grow. We can't force them to be different than they are. You can't take a rose and force it to be a mango tree, or vice versa. You can't take a child who is artistic and sensitive and force them into the mold of being, executive and decision making and not caring about other people. Each person has their own destiny, and these destinies are brought from many, many past lives. Especially important are the last few lives. So we're just a continuation of what we were in the last few lives. Our bodies look fairly much like they did. We might have a different colored skin. We might have slightly different outward appearance. But basically, we're an extension of what we were before. And the people around us are extensions of what they were before. That's the important point that I'm trying to make, so that we cannot force them to be something that they aren't. So that one of the first principles of good leadership is to look at the people that you're leading. Now I'll switch from a family to, let's say, a small business where you have, let's just say for the sake of the discussion, where you have 10 employees. You have to look at the strengths and weaknesses of each of those employees. And then you have to think about how their strengths can best be brought to a higher level, and how their weaknesses can not so much be forced to work on their weaknesses, but how you can arrange the environment. So if a person is not good with mathematics, it is no sense trying to make an accountant out of them. And vice versa, if a person is very good with mathematics and not very good with machinery, it's no good trying to have them be a machinist, have them be an accountant. So look at their strengths and see what their capabilities are, and then place them in positions according to their capabilities. This is obvious. I mean, any decent manager knows how to evaluate in this way. But the thing that is not obvious, and the thing that Swamiji emphasized over and over again, is that the position is not the important thing. The growth of the individual is what a leader should be concentrated on. So don't ask what this person can do for my business. Ask rather, how can I support this person to become the very best that he or she is capable of being? How can I support him or her to be as happy as they can possibly be, to be as expansive, and indeed, because this is a seminar coming from Ananda, how to support their spiritual life. And if the concentration of the leader is not on themselves, but is on the people, then we will naturally, intuitively, be able to figure out how to best work with that person and work with that group of people. What is the result? The result is that you will have loyalty from the people. You will have the desire, the natural desire of them to do the very best job that they can do. They won't do that out of fear. They won't do that out of concern that if they don't perform, they're going to lose their job. They'll do it out of a natural desire to do their best, to be pleasing, to return to you the love and the energy that you have given them. So the first principle is to concentrate on people. And in fact, Swami Kriyananda made this one of the very fundamental slogans of the whole work of Ananda. The way he put it is that people are more important than things. And so concentrate on the people and don't worry so much about the things that they're doing. Concentrate on their growth. The second principle is that we must be absolutely dharmic in everything that we do as leaders. What does this mean? This means that you cannot lie, you cannot cheat your customers, you cannot do anything that is outside of the principles of Dharma, which are non-lying, non-stealing, non-greed. You ought to see that your primary customer is God Himself. The primary purpose of your business is to please God. And it does not please God if you are trying to get rich at the expense of Dharma or at the expense of other people. And in fact, that's the second slogan that Swami uses, these two slogans. The second slogan is, where there is Dharma, there is victory. So where there is Dharma, there is victory, and people are more important than things. These are the two legs on which the whole of Ananda stands and works. And so these are the very fundamental, most important things that you have to work on as a leader, to have dharmic, supportive leadership for others. Now, there are some other principles that are very important. One principle that Swami taught us and worked with again and again and again is that the energy is more important than the form. What do I mean by that? Say you have this group of 10 people. More important than how productive they are would be how good the morale is. Because if the morale is good, if people are feeling supported and expansive and ready to do their best, then they will perform in that way. And even if that performance level is going to take some time to arise, then if you get the fundamental principle of supporting the people right, then they will grow into that job. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be kind of lacking in common sense. If people need training, of course, give them the proper training. If people need equipment, of course, get the proper equipment for them so that they can do their job quickly and efficiently. All of those commonsensical things need also to be done. You can't just be supportive to the people and ignore the realities of every business has its own realities. And so you have to apply yourself to that also. But don't think that you will succeed only by working with the non-human aspect of what you're doing. The people skills and the human aspect is ultimately much, much more important, even if what your job is, what you're working on, is not necessarily very people-oriented. Still, your staff is that way. And so support them, help them use common sense. Another very important principle that Swamiji gave us was, don't ask anything of anyone else that you're not ready and willing to do yourself. So what does this mean in practical terms? For Ananda, we have group meditations in the mornings. We shouldn't ask of other people to attend group meditations if we aren't willing to do that ourselves, or if we aren't meditating ourselves. Perhaps our particular time of life or the role that we're in makes it impossible to go to group meditations. If you're working at a job and your job starts early, it may be not possible for you to go to group meditations. But you should be supportive. You should be willing in your heart, so that if the circumstances changed, then you would be willing to do that. And so you have to be in your mind and in your heart able to say that whatever I ask of someone else, I myself would be willing to do that. Why is this important? Because people will understand that if you yourself are willing to do it, if you yourself are asking of them what you would ask of yourself in those circumstances, they will understand that there's a certain righteousness to it. They will sniff out false kind of, hypocritical behavior on the part of bosses. And so you don't want to be hypocritical in anything that you do. Be absolutely honest, absolutely integritous, and absolutely willing to do what you ask of other people to do. When you can do that, then the people around you will rally and will support you. In our life with Swamiji, that's what we saw primarily in what he did, and how he helped build Ananda, and how he helped train leaders. So one of the things that he would do is he would give a person a position that they could grow in, that they could expand in, not so much their skill level, but in their attitudes of taking responsibility, of trying to do a good job, of being able to work with a small group of people. And as people were able to succeed in those smaller roles, then he gave them a bigger role. But always, always looking to, how can I help this person to grow? How can I help them to take on a challenge that will be something that allows them to become a better person of who they are. He never forced us into roles that were uncomfortable for us, that we were unable to do, and he always gave us roles that would be spiritually beneficial. Sometimes, in fact, many times, he would have us do a job that was not a natural skill for us. Perhaps he would ask a person to write a book, and that person had never written a book before. It wasn't a natural skill that they had, but he knew that the person, by writing that book, or by teaching a class, or by leading a department, that person would develop attitudes and areas of their own functioning that were important to them spiritually. And then finally, and I will end with this, above all, he always supported our spiritual search above everything else. He told us a story about Yoganandaji, who one time a man was in charge of a project, and it was, I think it was the opening of the grounds at Lake Shrine, and there were hundreds of people invited to a big opening ceremony. And just a day or two, while they were extremely busy, this man came, but he was late. He was several hours late in coming to work that day. And Master asked him, "Why are you so late?" And the man just looked at Master and very sincerely said, "I was meditating deeply, Master." And Master said, "Oh, in that case, that's all right." And so Master Swamiji always supported the spiritual endeavor, the spiritual desires of the people around them above everything else, because in the final analysis, this life is only about one thing, and that is our relationship to God. Ultimately, this life is meant for our self-realization, our moksha, and everything that we do is only a means to achieving that end. And if you can keep that in mind, above all, in whatever leadership position you undertake, that it's the people and their spiritual growth that this life is all about, then you will undoubtedly be able to be a good and successful leader. You will have expanded on the principles of supportive leadership. Joy to you.
Hello. I'd like to continue on this theme now, and I'd like to touch on some aspects that we've observed and in Swamiji's leadership, and also that he writes about in the book. And the first thing that is very important is twofold. One, a leader needs to have a vision of the project they're working on, but also the energy and commitment to manifest that vision. So we were as part of Ananda from the very beginning, and Swami drew his vision for World Brotherhood colonies, as Yoganandaji called them, from his guru, Yoganandaji. And this was something that was also inherently of interest to Swamiji from a young age, to start self-sustaining World Brotherhood colonies where the underlying principles are plain living and high thinking. And so Swami, from the very beginning of Ananda, the first days, he had that vision and he held it out, but and shared it with us so that we understood it. We understood what the long-term projection was, even though there weren't the specifics. We do this A, B, C, D, but it was more working with the flow of energy, working with holding the goal clearly in mind, and then allowing God to guide you every step of the way. And this is very important for our own spiritual life as well, to hold the goal of God realization clearly in front of you, and then work with the Guruji to accomplish that goal. So having a vision is the first part, but then the second aspect of this is to put out the energy needed to manifest it. And throughout the course of Ananda's history, Swamiji was forever serving, forever coming up with new projects that would move the work forward. And it was so important, particularly in the early days, because there's a saying from the Bible, as the twig is bent, so the tree groweth. And so from the beginning, he gave the example of determination, overcoming obstacles. In the beginning, Swami would go out 5 days a week and be teaching classes all around Northern California, where we are based. And then he would come back on weekends and he would do weekend retreats and programs and guidance for people, and he would be writing books in the evening. And so for all of us in the early days of Ananda, most of us were out of college, hadn't had a lot of experience in the workplace, and we were just sort of watching life happen. But then the example of Swamiji with his determination and his energy, if there wasn't enough money, he would go out and earn the money. If there was a problem with the county about permits and so forth, he would go and talk to those people. And we began to get the idea that we need to put out a lot of energy as well. And so we did it in many ways. We build beautiful organic vegetable and fruit gardens. We started small businesses. We started the seed of the Ananda Living Wisdom Schools. And people worked. Those who stayed, not everyone followed Swamiji's example, but those who stayed understood that following his example, we need to work hard if we want to bring this ideal, this vision, this service to our Guru into manifestation. And so in everything that you do, those two principles have to be present. You need to have, if you don't know where you're going, how can you get there? And so to have a vision of where you're going and then put out the energy no matter what obstacles come in front of you. And we often quoted Master's wonderful sayings, there are no obstacles, there are only opportunities. And then also bite off more than you can chew and then chew it. So this was very prevalent throughout the course of Ananda's history. And as I say, Swami continued as the work spread worldwide to be a model of putting out the energy, whether I was giving public talks or writing books or working with the people in the ashram. But till his final days, literally, he was still putting out the energy to help build Ananda. Now, the second thing of which Swamiji was an excellent example was to be a good leader, to manifest anything, to work with other people. Leadership is not about driving people, it's about involving them. And this he did so beautifully. And I think many of the projects he created were just so people could put their own energy into it, their own ideas, their own creativity. I've seen people who are poor leaders do the opposite, where you have to do this and this is my project and you're not up to snuff, and that kind of energy and consciousness just kills the spirit in people, and maybe they'll keep doing the job, but their heart isn't in it because they don't feel they themselves are valued. But Swami never drove people. He had tremendous energy, but his position was always, if you want to get on the bandwagon, you are most welcome, but it's your choice. And so involving the free will and the involvement of others, and to show an innate respect for their abilities. And it's not that we all did everything right or well, quite the contrary. But he allowed us to learn from our mistakes. This was a very strong lesson he gave to Jyotish and to me, where there was someone, frequently, but there was someone starting a project, and Swami said, "What do you think?" And we said, "Well, we don't think it will work. Others have started it, and the project has never been able to succeed." And Swami was very strong with us. He said, "Maybe you understand that, but this person doesn't yet understand that. So you need to let them learn from their own mistakes." And that's certainly what Swamiji did for us. He let us learn from our own mistakes, but made us feel that even if we fell flat on our face, he was there to say, you tried, you put out the energy, you gave it the best that you could. And so in that process, I think it's one of the secrets why there is such strength in Ananda globally, because he developed the ability in other people to think for themselves, to put out their own creative energy, to find solutions to problems. And it gave all of us, a whole generation, and I hope we can pass that on to succeeding generations, the ability to say, we can do this, we have the ability. And that's the difference between driving people and supportively leading them. That you build strength in your people, and that strength will help your project to endure. And then finally, Swamiji gave us the example in his supportive leadership of not ego involvement, not attachment. And he always, there was never a sense that this is my project. It was always, I am a disciple of my great guru, and this project is his project. If you would like to help me in this project, it would be a wonderful thing for me, for you, but it's not mine. And the role of leadership is not about importance. I remember once someone asked us, who was given a position of leadership, when do we start feeling important? And I was so dismayed by that question, because I thought they don't understand that the leader is the servant of all. The leader has to, when everyone else leaves the job, the leader stays and finishes it up. And so in any role of leadership that we have, to always remember that if we take it to our as an ego balm, if as we take it, oh, I'm important, I have more talent, I'm better than other people, spiritually that's deadly. If we can take it as I'm the least important, there are so many talented people in the project I'm working on, and if I can work with their strengths together, we can succeed. So these are ways that we can see that leadership is a divine expression. Leadership is a pathway to spiritual growth if it's done, as Jyotish was saying, dharmically, supportively, humbly, with humility, with commitment and energy. And all these are ways that Swamiji exemplified for us. And it's someone once asked a man who traveled all over the world and had seen many spiritual organizations and ashrams, and he was a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and they asked him, of all your travels, which do you think is the organization that has the greatest strength? And he paused, and then with humility on our part, I shared this story. He said, the best organizations that I've seen around the world are Ananda, Ananda, and Ananda, because Swami Kriyanandaji has instilled strength and confidence in all the members, and it will continue on in that way. So we hope these thoughts will be helpful to you in your life, and we hope that you will also read this wonderful book, The Art of Supportive Leadership,